This is how we do it on Continuing Conversations. Welcome back. I'm Michael Dismuke. I am a lead writer for Captain's Log. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG, in addition to being a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for both those aforementioned products. I'm rushing today to go straight to introductions because we have so much to talk about. It's such an amazing crew here tonight. And so let's go straight to Jim Johnson.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG, both published by Modiphius Entertainment. Lo, these many 7 years now, going on year 8. We're super excited. And I am thrilled to have two awesome guests on the show with us tonight. So, Michael, why don't we start with Maurice? So, Maurice, you're new to the show. We have a tradition here when our guests introduce themselves. We also ask you to please talk just a little bit about your favorite Star Trek series and also your favorite Star Trek character, and not necessarily Captain, but your favorite Star Trek character as well. So why don't you kick it off there, sir?
Okay, so my name is Maurice Broaddus. I'm a science fiction and fantasy author. I'm also a middle school teacher and librarian, and then I'm also a community organizer here in Indianapolis. I head up a group called Cafe Creative, which is a collective of some of the just dopest artists here in the city. Let's see. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I've written about 18 books, I believe, and just had over 100 short stories published. So, you know, doing a thing, trying to do a thing.
How you do?
Yeah. Now, favorite Star Trek series to like anyone who's even, I will fight on any hill about this, but it's Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine for me, I mean, it came at the right time. It just had my favorite character on it. So my favorite character, well, I mean, Sisko always has a special place in my heart, but my actual favorite character is Worf. But when they transferred Worf over to Deep Space Nine, I mean, Deep Space Nine was already hitting it as my favorite Star Trek, right? It was already hitting it. But then it's like, oh, you know what? We need to up it a notch. We're going to bring over Worf. And I'm like, so Worf comes over and Sisko shaves his head. And I'm like, oh, it is on now. It is on. And so, so for me, Deep Space Nine, Worf, Sisko, that combo. Yeah, I'm in.
Awesome. Fantastic. And Derek, for the folks who've been on our show for a while, they know you. But why don't you give us an intro again anyway, just for the sake of doing so.
Cool. Thanks, Jim. Well, I'm Derek Tyler Attico. I'm a 2-time winner of the Star Trek Strange New Worlds anthology, where we met. Mm-hmm. I have been a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures, and I'm also the author of the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, which is right here. Which comes out next day, November 21st. Favorite series, I don't think it's any surprise at this point that it is Deep Space Nine. And I would be saying that even if I wasn't writing the autobiography, it's definitely Deep Space Nine. It's because I think Deep Space Nine is one of the most reality-based versions of Star Trek. Favorite character is definitely Sisko. But then, like Maurice, putting Sisko aside, I would say probably Garrick, just because he's just such a multidimensional character. Yes. Right,
for sure. Right. Because he was the start of one of my favorite two-parters in there. Right.
Right. No, it's fine. But it's Garrick. Just because he's so duplicitous, multi-layered, and his arc over 7 years is an incredible arc as well. So I think it's a phenomenal character. So it would be second would be definitely Garrick.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Derek. That's awesome. So Michael, I hope you're okay. I know you're a huge Voyager fan, obviously, but you're surrounded by DS9 stands tonight, so it's okay. You know, we do plenty of Voyager themed episodes. We've done some 7 episodes. Now we'll do a DS9 Sisko, Garrick, and other characters tonight. So I think it's okay.
No. I'll live.
Yeah.
I want to say what inspired this. Many of you who saw me come back from Gen Con know that I had a wonderful experience there back in August 2023. One of the biggest takeaways that I can't stop talking about, which really brought this group together here, is a panel that Maurice and Derek did on Afrofuturism in books. And Jim, we've talked about this quite a bit in the years that we've been doing continuing conversations. I know it links with a piece of art that you selected, Jim, for your Keyhole to Eternity series that came out in the Tricorder pack. Yeah. And I've talked about this where we have a definitively person of African heritage, even with the lip plate there. And that's one of my favorite pieces of art in the book. And then all of a sudden, I go to Gen Con and we hear Maurice, Derek, several other authors up there talking about what Afrofuturism is. And I'm going to be humble real quick, and I'm going to go and have the exact conversation I had with Derek that Saturday morning there at the con. He says, yeah, I'm doing a panel on Afrofuturism. And I went, what's that? Yeah. And he says, oh, well, you just got to come see. And boy, mind blowing. So now with that, I hand the baton over to Derek and Maurice to kind of frame this conversation for us. And I want to know, what is Afrofuturism and why is it so important for writing nowadays?
Okay. I had that exact same moment a few years ago because I had a short story collection come out. And this is probably like 2016, something like that. And the way my collection was arranged, I had stories of the past, stories in the present, stories set in the future. And then all of a sudden the reviews started coming out and they're like, oh man, it's a great collection. Yeah, I'll just throw that in there. Oh, it's a great collection. But anyway, but a lot of the reviews start tracking with, but it's when Maurice starts talking about the stories in the future, that's when his light as an Afrofuturist really starts to shine. And I'm like, an Afro what now? Because I'd never heard the term before. And so then I start doing a bit of a deep dive because the term came into parlance in like 1993. It was a sociologist named Mark Derry. He coins the term. And the reason he coins the term is because he's just like, there's like 5 Black people writing in speculative fiction, right? And he name checks like Sam Delaney, Octavia Butler, Steve Barnes, Amaro, Charles Saunders. So he name checks these authors, and but he's just like there's just not that many Black people writing in this field that we're going to call Afrofuturism, and Afrofuturism is now popped into the pop culture parlance because of Black Panther came out. And so all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, Black Afrofuturist this and Afrofuturism that, and so for me, the definition I use for Afrofuturism, it's art through the Black cultural lens. It critiques the present, but that critique is rooted in history. It's rooted in the past. But most importantly, it points to the future. It's always about imagining ourselves into the future. And I always think of what the author Tananarive Due said, that the act of imagining ourselves into the future is the first act of resistance. So that's why I come at Afrofuturism.
Beautiful. Derek, what's your take on it?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to top that. I'm just not. Everything that Maurice said is well, obviously accurate, but just true and true to the heart. I would say that I first found out about Afrofuturism, I think probably around the same time I discovered Octavia Butler. I didn't really discover Octavia Butler till around the mid 2000s, like 2014 and 15. I hate to say it. And when I did, I was just blown away. No, I knew about Afrofuturism before that, but I had not known about Butler. And Professor, it was like, how do you not know about Butler? And we sat down and she gave me her Xenogenesis books. And I absorbed them in like a weekend because it was just nuts. And I'd always had this idea of what Afrofuturism was, but then reading Butler, it just married that whole idea, and it just really took the idea and almost gave life to it, and I could see it bearing fruit because there's no one, or there's very few that I think are better than what Butler does, and that idea of a people of color moving forward in the future existing and flourishing in the future is, I think, one of the staples and one of the pillars and foundations of Afrofuturism. So with that in mind, I think that germinated in my head for a while, and I will say that was something that was definitely prevalent as I wrote the autobiography. It had to be. It had to be. As I wrote the autobiography, Afrofuturism had to definitely be everywhere in the autobiography, and still be Star Trek, because Star Trek is, in a lot of ways, has themes of throughout it of Afrofuturism. You know.
Yeah, you both are, Jim. They have me back ordering books again while I'm watching the podcast. It's becoming a habit. Whenever I have guests on now, where I start buying books on Amazon, I want to.
Good problem to have, Michael.
Yeah, my takeaway, just so you know, you gentlemen know, from what my biggest takeaway was from the panel was Afrofuturism to me, and now I'm really being thoughtful of this when I write, is being able to write human cultures without a dependence on Western culture. So many times, we see nowadays that success is dependent upon approval from whoever's in power. Whereas this is a future where that does not even apply anymore. It's not even necessary. I think about, just as a quick anecdote, when I went to China and traveled through China, it was the first time I was like, wow, they're not American exceptionalism at all. They don't think that there's a dependence on it. They've been around for 4,000 plus years. And it struck me, and my friends who are from China were like, wow, it really elevated the experience for me. Like, wow, I need to get out there and explore more cultures and understand that any human group can succeed. And so that's what I got from your panel. And then Jim, I'm going to let you take it from here, because honestly, I think, to frame for the people who listen to our show regularly, where we talk about Star Trek adventures, I do want you to kind of express some purposefulness you put on us as writers and how to approach it. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about that to really launch us.
Oh, sure. I do have some questions, but I'll save the questions for a little bit later. But yeah, Michael, I'll just start on that with the kind of jumping in. So I started working on Star Trek Adventures as a writer, right? And then I rapidly got involved in being an editor and a copy editor and a proofreader and project manager and all that stuff. But once they gave me the reins in 2019 to actually just manage the line, like, okay, we're giving you the line, go do whatever. I was really intentional about wanting to bring in more diverse voices into the line as writers and also artists. Like I really encourage our art director to go find more artists who are willing to do diverse stuff, right? And I really challenged him to think about when we're writing art briefs for all the books and we're writing out art briefs, get more diverse. Like we want to see different body shapes. We want to see different skin tones, not just for humans, but also Vulcans, Bajorans, they're not all monocultures, right? They're not all monochrome. Like every species should have some diversity to it. So I was really intentional about that. And so I do challenge my writers. I really challenge them to say, look, okay, think differently, think outside of the traditional, scope that we've had. And I think we've seen some results to that. And I know, Michael, you talk about that tricorder piece of art a lot, which I'm grateful for, because I was really nervous about that, because obviously I am a white male and I am really nervous about doing stuff like this, because I don't want people to think I'm appropriating other cultures and just dropping them into Star Trek because it looks cool, because that's not the intention. The intention is to show that the human diversity and the human spirit will continue on into the 23rd, 24th, 25th centuries, just like we see on screen. And absolutely there could be a Maori captain. Why not? Right? Maoris are a huge important culture here on Earth and in New Zealand, and it makes sense to me that they would join Starfleet and want to do it. I have not had anybody from New Zealand push back on me and say, no, I don't think we would do that. The lip plate, I thought, I will admit, by all means, I was absolutely influenced by Black Panther when I saw that, because that was such an amazing movie. And I was like, wow, look at this culture on display, all these different cultures right here on the screen. It was amazing. And I did my research and I was like, you know what? I think there are certain cultures on Earth who are still honoring that tradition. Why wouldn't they carry that on into the 23rd, 24th, 25th centuries and beyond? So, again, I'm really trying to be intentional about that. So, Michael, I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but
no, that was dead on. I wanted to frame that because Jim always has this kind of open invitation to new writers and new artists, and he's not joking. Is what I want to say, is that people can really feel that door is being open, and of course, just like Maurice and Derek in their writing are opening up doors, and for me, just like changing how I write.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions you actually, Derek, I think you kind of touched on it already, where you were talking about Afrofuturism and how Trek kind of from the beginning had glimmers of that. Because I was going to ask you both, like when you think about Star Trek and you think about Afrofuturism, like do you feel like Uhura fits into that? Even though back in the 60s, nobody knew what Afrofuturism was as a concept, right? I mean, we were certainly writing toward it, and we had writers who were writing fiction along those lines. But like, do you feel like Uhura fits in that mold? Even, and then moving forward into the other series, you've got Geordi, you've got Worf, you've got Sisko, obviously Sisko and Jake and so forth. But just any thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think it definitely is. Afrofuturism, as defined, would be that it's an idea and a principle and people and characters in the future moving that idea of the culture forward. And Uhura does that. I mean, I know there are some people that would probably say, well, it has to be created by people of color, to be like Afrofuture. But I don't necessarily agree with that fully, because I think that Afrofuturism starts in your heart, and if you want to move something forward and if you see, because I think part of Afrofuturism grows, not all of it, but part of it grows out of what we see as an injustice, right? We see an injustice and we say, well, there's a deficiency. And so since there is a deficiency, that needs to be equaled and leveled in the future. And it needs to flourish in the future because it's not in so many aspects here in the present. And so I think, and I'm not obviously going to speak for the man, but I think Roddenberry, looking ahead, he's like, what do I want my future, my world building that he was creating? What did he want that to be? And he wanted a future where things were level, where all colors, all creeds had this equality. I mean, and he said as much himself, and so that is, if not Afrofuturism, it is definitely on that path towards Afrofuturism. So I definitely think he was definitely onto something with the character of her and then of Geordi. I know when I was working with you on Shackleton, and we were creating species, and I thought about the Vinchari species. I mean, they're not human, but I was thinking about creating a diverse species, because another thing that Star Trek always does is that it shows through allegory, and so I was thinking about the Vinchari, and I was thinking about ways to show them as a diverse species and ways to show them, because the more we show diversity in aliens, what we're doing is we're holding a mirror up to them and we're showing ourselves, right? So I was thinking all of that is what was going on when I was thinking about the Vinchari and I was creating them, was not only just to create a cool species that I think would be great for character and story and plot, but something that could also be diverse and have diversity within their own culture, and to show the diversity within their own culture, and then have that reflect as people hopefully play it out, So it's not necessarily Afrofuturism in regards to the Vinchari, but it is showing diversity, which I think Star Trek has always done, has always pushed forward for diversity. I know it's a little long-winded, but
no, that's great. That's great insight, Derek. Thank you for that. Maurice, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah. Because I'm familiar with some of those arguments where it's like Afrofuturism to be perfectly categorized as Afrofuturism has to be Black created, that sort of thing. I've heard that argument, and I agree with it to a point, except for when we come to like media, because television and film are collaborative processes. So I mean, by default, we have to broaden the definition.
Yes.
But that being said, I mean, and even with like Black Panther, for example, Black Panther was created by Stan Lee. So, and Jack Kirby.
Right.
So it's like, but yet that's our standard bearer for Afrofuturism. And I'm going to not go down the nerd rabbit hole about, by when they got Christopher Priest to write Black Panther, and then all of a sudden you do have a Black creative voice, and suddenly Black Panther gets redefined as a character and re-examined and reimagined. But that's me not doing that. I will say, though, that along those lines, though, it being a collaborative process, a hero doesn't exist in a vacuum. Nichelle has to bring her creative self to that role. Nichelle's imagining, and in fact, the story of Dr. Martin Luther King encouraging her to stay on the show, because we're all imagining ourselves into the future through her. Right. So that's very much an Afrofuturist move. And then we move into Next Generation and Geordi. And for me, it wasn't just Geordi. Geordi was one piece, but for me, it was actually Worf. Because speaking about Star Trek, speaking in allegory, for me, Worf, in many ways, and not many, I even wrote a paper about this at one point, and I talked about Worf's journey of Blackness. Because I'm very, if you examine Worf's journey, who is he? He's a character. He is, he's in one culture, but he gets adopted by another. He basically assimilates into Starfleet, and then he encounters his people in a raw moment, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, now I got to rethink my identity in light of this encounter with my people, and then he begins this journey over the arc through the rest of the series into Deep Space Nine, as he deepens this journey of him exploring his culture and what does it mean to be Klingon in this greater society. What does it mean for him to move by his own path? What does it mean for him to be true to his culture, not being assimilated by this greater culture, but establishing what that looks like within his context. And I was just like, every time I'd watch that Worf episode, I'd be like, ooh, this just speaks to me so hard, because this is my everyday. And so we have that piece, and then we get to Sisko, who, for me, again, you have a powerful actor, Avery Brooks, who's bringing his full self to co-create this character. And again, when I talk about Afrofuturism having that element of looking to the past, I mean, when Sisko picks up that baseball, that Negro League baseball, that's him going, you know what, I don't exist in a vacuum either. There is a past, and there's a past that forms who I am. Even though I exist in the future, it's all rooted in the past for him. And there's even his role as an ancestor, literally, all comes to bear in terms of of how Afrofuturism is reflected through Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, and I would also add really quick that Mr. Brooks, Avery Brooks, he pushed a lot of Afrofuturism in Star Trek, just from the African attire that he would be in on his downtime, that the character would be in on his downtime, the African art on the walls. That was all Avery Brooks, and so it's that marriage, it's that perfect marriage between the writers, which were not Black, creating a really thoughtful, insightful character with deep roots in Louisiana, in New Orleans, a quintessential place of Black history and culture, and then marrying that with Avery Brooks, who and those two connections, and then pushing that forward, which gave us such a powerful performances on the screen and a powerful character that we're still talking about all these years later. So
Yeah, I think one of the other things about Sisko that I really appreciated as I was watching DS9 and getting into it is the amazing job that he and Cirroc Lofton and the directors and the writers did with that relationship between Ben and Jake. Like that kind of a relationship between a father and son. Whether they're Black or white or yellow or whatever color, like you just didn't see that often on television. They had some like really deep emotional connections and scenes, and like you could see that they were putting the work in behind the scenes to like really get that relationship together. And I think even Cirroc mentioned at one point that he was like Avery Brooks's other son, because they would go to ball games and stuff together, and they were always or not always, but they were often inseparable. And Avery Brooks really took him under his wings to some extent, I think. But it translated so well to the screen, because you just really saw that relationship and how much it meant. And I think the visitor, that obviously the great DS9 episode that hit me hard the first couple of times I watched it, and then when I had my son, I watched it again and it hit me in a whole different way, because I was like, oh wait a minute, now I'm a dad and now I've got a son. It was so amazing. But their performances were just so good, and you just add that extra layer of the fact that they're both both men of color. And historically there haven't been a lot of television shows that represent a positive relationship like that, right? It's always been kind of stereotypically negative, and that's been hard to get past, right? And I wish we could get more people to watch DS9, not just because it's Star Trek, but because of these relationships and the cultural significance of what we were seeing on screen.
I want to add to it too, because I know I'm an anomaly. I say the way I grew up because I grew up in a mixed family. My father's African American, grew up in segregation. I am amazed by him because I can tell you with all honesty, in all my years of existence, he's never had a chip on his shoulder. He's never blamed someone for this obstacle or that. And so I grew up in a household very similar to the Cosby Show. And it was funny because people would come over and be like, man, you like living in the Huxtable household, which at the same time was corresponding with Deep Space Nine. So my anomaly is that I didn't find it weird. My dad, a very successful businessman. My family, literally, if you go to our weddings or anniversaries, it looks like a UN gathering. There's a little bit of everything there. And as I grew up, I didn't think about it when I was writing or creating. My friends were mixed who were playing RPG with me or telling stories with me. So I kind of had this assumption, being in the Bay Area with all this diversity, that, oh, that's normal, until I started meeting friends from the East Coast and the South. and then hearing conversations like this, where it's like, oh, not only me, and going back to your point, Maurice, about the collaborative process, I think it's for us to be deliberative about making sure other stories are told. And I wish I would have known earlier, so I could have been more deliberative for the benefit of that. Throw that to talk about.
So, Michael, I have to ask you a favor. Can you move to your left just for a moment? I want to see what's behind you in that picture. That is an amazing backdrop. I don't think I've seen that anywhere. I'm curious to know where you got that from, because I really appreciate how much diversity is present in those 15 pictures.
Yeah. And I want to point out something about that. I'll go ahead and send you the link to it. It's from a Tumblr I just came across. But even though we're focusing on Afrofuturism, again, I have family of every mix and ethnicity and creed and stuff like that. On this picture, for those of you who can't see it on the podcast, not only are the popular African-American Black actors pictured, the Star Trek characters here, but even ones, from Asian descent, Hispanic descent, those who represented Native Americans or Indigenous First Nation people, people from East India. So, it's all in here. And I thought what was cool about it is that anybody who's listening or watching this podcast, it's not just about Afrofuturism. It's about what cultures are not having their story told. Mm-hmm. And how can you elevate the humanity by deliberately, again, telling those stories. So yeah, I thought this poster was super cool too, Jim, and I'll get it to you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. I appreciate that. So I do have another question that this is a little self-serving, but I want to know anyway. I will admit I am not super well read on Afrofuturism. I'm working on that in the time that I have available to me. But what I'm curious about is, and hopefully you can enlighten me, is Afrofuturism like meant to be all encompassing world, forgive me for lack of a better term, blackness in the future, or is there variations within the, let's call it a genre, right? It may not be a genre, it may be something bigger than that, but is there like Afrofuturism and like French African futurism and American, Afro-American futurism? Like, are there different elements within the bigger umbrella of Afrofuturism?
Yeah. Actually, the short answer is yes. Short answer is yes.
Yes.
That's super cool. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think it was Dr. Pamela Sturm, I can't remember her last name, but she coined the term African futurism to describe, futurism that was specifically from the continent. I have many Caribbean friends who write specifically Caribbean futurism because it looks different. It comes from a different mindset and different perspective. Typically when I think of Afrofuturism, I am thinking Black American futurism, frankly, and each of those. If nothing else, it should point to the fact of Black is not a monolith. Exactly. When all said and done, Blackness is not a monolith, and so there are different expressions of that from where no matter from different aspects of the diaspora, from where we find ourselves. Those stories will look different, and so that's what I've always kind of appreciated about it.
There was something else said by I'm forgetting her name right now. She was on the panel with you. On Afrofuturism. And forgive me for not calling her name right now, but she said something amazing. Science fiction, for decades, it may have the absence of people of color. Maybe you watch the old Mystery Science Theater. It's hard to find a person who's in a dignified way portrayed if they're a person of color. If you look at these old movies, and she said Afrofuturism is not a future absent of, say, white people,
right?
Because true Afrofuturists and a better future never emulated the abuse they may have received in past centuries. And that was
right. That's exactly right.
It's like, whoa, imagine a future. And this is what I invite the audience to do. Imagine a future where you walk onto a planet with, say, just people of color, and there is no racism because it's not a tool they ever needed or used. And that's an Afrofuturist idea too. And that blew my mind. That sent me reeling.
Yeah, it sounds like a Dr. Cherie Renee Thomas right there. I think that's who said it.
Yeah, that's it. That's who said it.
That was one of the, I think, most profound things for me in '93 when I first watched Deep Space Nine. And you'll see it in Deep Space Nine. You see it throughout all of Trek, but I think for me at least, it was more pronounced and more obvious in Deep Space Nine. Is that at no point is anyone talking about the fact that Sisko is a man of color? Because why would you in the 23rd, 24th, 25th century? It's a non-issue. And that is phenomenal. And whereas there may be an issue for us today, what Gene Roddenberry is saying, we got past all of that ridiculousness. We moved as a species, we moved past it. And that's one of the beautiful things about, and perhaps I think the most beautiful thing about Star Trek is that we've moved past certain things. And because we've moved past certain things, moved past a certain level of ignorance, I think our level of progression, at least in my opinion, accelerated because we're working together. And when you're not bickering and when you're not having wars and when you're not being petty and ignorant and you're working together, things progress a heck of a lot faster. And at least that's how I see it. And I think that's what Roddenberry is saying, because if you look at how fast humanity progresses, even other alien species are like, what's happening with humanity? Because we got our act together. So
well said. Can't wait.
It's a matter of time. I think we're seeing it, right? I mean, even in America, like the diversity is creeping along here year after year, generation after generation, and maybe possibly in my lifetime, Caucasian will be a minority in America for the first time in ever, right? And you'll see that shift, and that's just a natural progression of things. And I think that's part of why we're having so many cultural challenges right now. Is there's some resistance to that naturally, and that status quo is being challenged everywhere. And I think, maybe by the 22nd century, it will be a non-issue, right? And we won't have to use labels for anybody, right? The LGBTQ community, the people of color, of whatever color you are, race, religion, etc. It's certainly aspirational, right? I mean, I hate to admit that it's aspirational, but we all collectively just keep at it, right?
I'll say really quick, something that we all can identify here, because we're all writers, is that I know Jim does. I know I do. I listen to music when I write.
Mm-hmm.
And so what did I do when I started writing the autobiography? I started listening to Star Trek music, and it didn't really feel right, which is really weird. I mean, I was listening to Deep Space Nine. I was like, it's just too much, which is too on the nose. And that's really weird, because it's never happened to me before, to not listen to Star Trek when writing something Star Trek. And I found myself, I actually moved, and this is God honest truth. I went to the Wakanda soundtrack, to the Black Panther soundtrack, to the Black Panther soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to realize that it started to motivate me. And I felt like the works done in other pieces what I was doing was continuing a conversation. Yes, these are different IPs, yes, but the conversation, the idea, the hope, the thought is being a thorough line that is being passed through from Black Panther to Star Trek to The Expanse. These are things that are being, these ideas of people working together of all colors in the future. And I really had a really great time listening to the two Black Panther soundtracks while writing this book.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really fascinating.
It really helped me.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Derek. I knew that you were not. Let me rephrase. I knew that you were another writer that listens to music while you're writing, right? Whether it's lyrical music or soundtracks or something. I know, like a ton of us do that, right? I mean, I'm not sure, Maurice, if you do as well, but I've noticed within the last 5 or 6 years, I think I've gravitated away from soundtracks, like scores, orchestral scores, and especially when I'm working on Star Trek, because I am so intently focused on making sure that our manuscripts are, have that diverse feel. I've been listening to a lot more world music. Now, I've been listening to world music since gosh, it must have been in the early 80s. 1989 was a big year for me, because that's when I was in college and my mind was being open to the world, right? Because I came from a little teeny tiny high school in Rhode Island with like 100 people in the graduating class, and I went to George Mason here in Fairfax, Virginia, which had 20,000 students. So I went from 100 students in my high school class to 20,000 at George Mason, and I was like, okay, this is a whole different world, and it was culture shock, right? Because I just didn't know. But Peter Gabriel started a record label in 1989 called Real World Records, and he was intentional about making sure that label introduced the world to musical artists from all over the world, whether it was Asia Pacific, Africa, Madagascar, Europe, South America, whatever, music that your average dumb American, even though I grew up, I mean, in this late 70s, early 80s, I was all about R&B and hip hop and rap. Like I was in New York, listening to Run DMC and Grandmaster Flash and all that classic stuff, old school, and then continue on from there. But the world music really got me hooked, because it was so diverse and so incredibly complex. And just like the Middle East is different from Africa, and Madagascar is different from South Africa, and like there's just so many cultures that are woven into that. So I love listening to world music when I'm working on anything Star Trek lately, because it hits me differently than listening to the beautiful scores from the movies and the television shows. Nothing wrong with them, because those composers are amazing. But they're Star Trek, and I don't feel like they're like diverse, right? There's a fine line there, I guess. But Michael, Maurice, do you both write to music, or do you need like silence? Or I'm just curious from a writer perspective.
Yeah, I tend to. I realize that I do write to music a lot. A lot of my works, you can almost see the soundtrack of what I'm listening to woven into the actual fabric of the story, which was pointed out to me after the fact. I was like, oh, dang, you could hand tell what I've been listening to. here lately, I think my last couple of projects, since they've been so jazz influenced, I've gone back and suddenly just started to discover some jazz artists who I grew up and I missed all of that, frankly. And then so I'm discovering like Charles Mingus and
Oh, I was just about to say that,
right? and all these cats, I'm just now discovering them. And and my last couple of books were written to classical jazz music. So.
Good. Yeah, I want to say it depends on the scene. I wrote a scene recently. I can't talk about it yet. It will premiere in March, but I did listen to Vivaldi's score while writing it because I think it matched the characters. So I'll listen to some classical music, but really when I'm getting down and deep with sci-fi, I'm listening to Chick Corea, Jean LaPonte, Pat Metheny soundtracks, and some of their far out stuff because they're making my brain fire. And I kind of know there's one album called To the Stars by Chick Corea. It was written off of an L. Ron Hubbard book. It was purposely written to be sci-fi. So yeah, I'm definitely inspired by music. Is that right?
And I was going to say, when I was writing Sweep of Stars, I was big into Kamasi Washington for that one. Yeah. Kamasi Washington just took me right to the stars.
Well, I have a question for y'all too, because again, this time is flying by, and we are, we talk a lot about RPG on this podcast, and this is real life story, and I've been pleased with the outcome. So I've had players in my game appropriately, ask like, "Hey, I actually want to play a person of color." Yeah, these are white men who are like, I want to play a person of color. How do you all feel about that? Me, I don't care because my favorite characters to play in RPGs women. So, I never asked permission. I just went and did it. But and these are powerful women, by the way, too. Powerful, like run the ship kind of women. But I thought that was an interesting question because I never thought that someone would be uncomfortable doing that. Again, I grew up with a very wide variety of people and they played whatever they felt like that day, no matter what the ethnicity was. So let's approach that a little bit. Suppose we do have player groups that want to explore and forward the idea of not only Afrofuturism, but Indo-futurism, Asian futurism, whatever they want to, some futurism in a game. What are some safety protocols and how do they do the research to get it right and not offend? Any advice you have? Because I encourage people to do it because we're role playing. That's the point, right? So what do you have to say about that?
Wow, that's a. Woo. Okay, while Maurice is thinking, I'm gonna take a stab at that one. I'm gonna say because I've been a player for a while. That's a tightrope right there because every group is different. Every group is different, and I can speak like for my group, that could be fine, But my group was Latin and Black and predominantly men, right? I think if you're going to role play a person of color, and if the DM or is going to allow that, you can't lean on any stereotype. First of all, you have to think about if you're going to allow that and why. Why are you going to allow it? What is it about playing that person of color that is beneficial for that game? Is beneficial? Why are you creating this character? Are you exploring something that you've never done before? Why? Because that's a tightrope, and I really feel like it can't be rooted in any stereotype, and before that has to be before that's undertaken. If there are no persons of color in the group, then research has to be done that's thoughtful and meaningful. And what I mean by research is not watch Boys in the Hood.
Exactly.
You have to really think about why you want to play a person of color. What is the motivation for wanting to play a person of color? Because there's just so many stigmas and stereotypes around that. And what does it mean for the game? and for the campaign, because that's really tricky.
I'm trying to sum it up as like avoid. I'm trying to say avoiding the accoutrement moments, because we know we've always heard, some controversy about what happened with Voyager and how they portrayed, indigenous, and it was all over the place. It didn't single out, hey, which tribe are you talking about here? But they conglomerated it all into one person, and so when you're watching it, you're like, okay, later on, you're like, ouch. And so how do we, I want to make sure my players are so conscious about it. They play a diverse set of characters, and they really do avoid the ouches, because we talk openly about it in our session zeros when designing these characters. Maurice, Jim? Curious to see what you think. Okay.
I was just thinking about my gaming group. I would absolutely forbid that. Because my group of friends, it would be absolutely offensive. I mean, so I'm just like, nah, y'all don't get to do that.
Well, let's keep in mind, it's your gaming group.
So, no, that's my gaming group. No, that's what I'm saying. My gaming group, it's off the table. No, it's, and it's interesting, because I'm thinking through it, and it's like, I've had no problem, me personally, I'll role play women and not blink twice. But I've never played outside of my culture. So even in the games, it's like when I'm playing Deadlands and I'm playing a cowboy, I'm still playing a black cowboy. And I'm literally sitting here thinking through my past in game playing. If I'm playing another culture, it's I've never.
Whenever I've done it, like playing, I played one of my biggest characters of all time that all my players loved to hate because she was so powerful. It was an East Indian woman, but it was based off a very strong East Indian woman I knew personally. And and I would just emulate her, and I even talk to her about it, like, hey, what would you do? And so it was very not where it's coming from me, and I love the culture, and
I do know, like, for me personally, part of it was because of the games that were written, is like, no, the games weren't written with me in mind, so I'm going to carve my space in these games. And so that was always the way I was coming at it. And I'm just, and then when I'm thinking about doing the other way, I'm just like, ooh, this is so fraught with this going horribly, horribly wrong, and like fairly no
potential for disaster.
So I'd have to, I would think about that, but I would still, I think asking those questions are actually valid. It's like, all right, so why do you want to do this? How do you want to do this?
And yet you write people of different ethnicities in your books, right? Both of you?
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. But see, that's a little different. And I think, there's a certain objectivity that all writers have to have, because and Maurice will say, we're not coming to any of those characters with any stereotypes. We shouldn't, unless we're creating a character, and that particular character may have certain thoughts and views of the world, and that's something different. But when you're creating or writing a character, you're just creating and writing characters. But no, that could be fraud. I mean, I've been in campaigns in college where people have played other characters of different colors or genders just to be, I'm not going to curse here, but just to be rude, extremely rude. And then we had to kick those individuals out of the campaign. So it's really fraught with the potential for disaster, because some people just want to, watch the world burn or watch the campaign burn, and want to throw dynamite into the campaign for no other reason than they want to see what will happen. And just being honest, so you really have to really think this through. And, if anything, I would say if anyone wants to do that, I would create at least 25 or 50 questions and think about, why does this individual want to do that? What research have they done? And make sure that it's going to be something that's going to be tasteful, respectful, and knowledgeable before even partaking something like that.
Oh man, I would love to see that. No, I would love to see that list of questions. That should be a blog in and to itself. I love that.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's
It's so interesting. I think I agree that it is fraught, and then there's a fine line that you have to walk there. But to play devil's advocate, right? Like if someone were to come into a Star Trek game and say, "Oh, I want to play a Vulcan," we don't scrutinize them with the same level, right? We don't say, "Okay, well, here's 25 or 30 questions to answer. Why do you want to play a Vulcan?" Right? Why is that so important to you? Or you want to play a Trill? Like why do you want to play a Trill and not a human? Because you're human. Like you're not a Trill.
And that's kind of where I was thinking through. Is like it's one thing where it's like I'm going to play within this culture versus I'm going to play within this race. Because one smacks of literally blackface, but one is an appreciation of a culture, and so I have no problem with someone playing within a culture.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I think we're all victims of having seen it abused for so long in media and done wrong. That it is a touchy subject, and it's too bad. And the reason I'll say from my cultural background is because I'm exposed to so many different ethnicities. My wife, she's Chinese and Black. Her best friend's Puerto Rican and Chinese. My best friend is Russian Jew mixed with Black and Nicaragua. And literally, I love their cultures. We learn about them. We travel to each other's places, countries, homes of origin, and there's this exploration. But understand that there was systems put in place to not even want us to explore that in a dignified way. So I think I'm glad you all spoke on that, because it's kind of like, if you're not coming at it with dignity and with good intention, and the people around the table know that you are never going to do anything offensive, we all oops and out. I mean, within our own subcultures, we oops and out. But you have pretty good friends who can forgive you. It's just something I would say, follow all the safety rules that Jim makes sure we all write about multiple times in all of our publications. But people may want to do it. Again, I play in a very safe group where we honor every ethnicity and gender and stuff. So, but it is a thing to talk about, have a courageous conversation about,
Yeah. And whatever the opposite of that group is, that's the group I play with. So we would have, there are not enough guardrails in the world. It's like, this is just going to be a chamber of just us. No one,
You sound like you play a lower decks game.
Lower decks. Or
and I should also, just to add to what Jim said, he's right, in regards, like, I want to play a Vulcan, and I'm not a person of color, but I want to play a Vulcan of color. I think that's cool. And the reason I think that's cool, thinking it through, is because there are certain guardrails already established in playing a Vulcan. You're not going to go really off the ranch, off the reservation, right? Because you're already playing a Vulcan or a Cleon or a Beta Z, or, there's already within the realm of, that's what's so cool about STA, is that if you're going to play any of the other species and you're going to play them a different color, to speak, then that's not really going to be an issue in STA, right? Because then you're playing more of the culture than you are playing the race, but these races are so hard cemented in their cultures. I think that you wind up playing a lot of the culture as opposed to the.
Yeah, that's funny, because no one assumes that there is a Black Vulcan subculture, because or Klingons of different colors, right? Stuff like that. It's just interesting.
Right. So so it's interesting. It is interesting.
How about that?
We could.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think if a group is having that session 0 and talking about it, and there's any uncertainty, well, we have close to 1,000 hours of Star Trek that you can watch that shows you the example. Like, this is how to do it. Uhura, Geordi, Worf, well, maybe not Worf, but Uhura, Geordi, Ben, Sisko, like they are Starfleet officers first and foremost. They may happen to be people of color, and maybe they're not people of color, but they are not, like you were saying earlier, they are not judged on their color. Like that does not influence who they are. Specifically as what they're doing, right? So like they're just as capable as everybody else on the screen. You got Sulu and Uhura and Kirk and Spock all on the bridge together, all doing their thing, super capable, all respectful of each other. Getting the job done. And if you can bring that philosophy to your game table, then hopefully there won't be any issues. And and that's just part of the fine art of developing your game group, right? You connect with each other, you touch base, you check in with each other. Are we on the right path? Are we making some stumbles somewhere? Do we need to course correct? Do we need to dial in a bit? and just, find that group that you mesh with. Maybe you're like Maurice's group, where you're completely opposite of everything and you're still having a great time together. Or maybe you're on the same wavelength in a different respect. But that's the important thing, is like, you all need to be on the same wavelength, and you don't have these rogue players coming in going, oh, I'm gonna play this character just to screw with everybody and be an ass about it. But because those types of folks, they tend to get not invited back, right? And then you move on. So really fascinating.
Good point. All right. I can't believe this time went by so fast. We got to have time for shameless self-promotion. So of course, this we're taping this on November 15th. And in 6 days, Derek has a book coming out. And this show premieres on December 1st, just so you know. So this is going to give us a chance to pump it up again, about a week after. So Derek, shameless self-promotion, you go first.
The Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko. Is a pleasure to write this. It's going to be even more fun to see everyone hopefully read this and enjoy it. It's coming out next Tuesday, November 21st. Worldwide, everywhere books are sold. You can pre-order now. Or go to your bookstore, or call them and ask them to carry it, if they're not, and enjoy it. And that's basically it. Read it, enjoy it.
It's already blowing up. I know it's blowing up, and it hasn't even, it's been released in Europe in some places, but it's been
released. Titan Books released it at Forbidden Planet, and thankfully people have read it, and I've gotten some good reviews, thankfully, so far. So, we'll see what everyone else thinks. Yeah.
Well, we wish you a lot of success for that, for sure. A lot of success, and what a privilege. All right, Maurice, now you have some news too, some shameless plugging to do.
Right. So my current series out is the Astra Black. Book 1 is Sweep of Stars. That's out. And then I believe later on next year, book 2, Breath of Oblivion, will be coming out. But before Breath of Oblivion comes out, I believe that comes out in the fall. In the spring, I will be having my book T'Challa Declassified, making its debut in April. So really looking forward to. I've seen the galleys in this book. It's pretty. I ain't gonna lie. I'm just like, I did that. I did that. But so yeah, I'm really looking forward to T'Challa Declassified coming out. As you can see, I may or may not be a Black Panther fan. Also,
yeah, I was super excited, Maurice. Our good friends Dayton Ward and Kevin Dillmore, they wrote the Iron Man Declassified book.
Okay,
and so that just came out. Like I think it just came out this week. It just came out this week. And I was flipping through it.
I just got mine too.
I looked at the back and I was like, "Ooh, there's going to be a Black Panther book, and ooh, there's going to be a Captain." And I already knew Dayton and Kevin worked on the Captain America book too, but I saw the Black Panther one, and I immediately hopped over to Amazon, and I saw that it was coming. It's currently planned on coming out in April, and your name was on it, and I was like, "Oh, perfect storm," because we're having him on the show.
Exactly.
So I am super excited. I pre-ordered it, of course. I had to because I'm a Marvel stan, and I'm super excited for it. So congratulations on that. Can't wait to see it. Maybe we'll get you back on the show again when it comes out so we can pump you up even more.
Well, I'd hate to have to do that again.
Well, I have to say this is a special show. I like I'm straight up transparent to the point of awkward. Anyone who knows me, and being able to be on a panel, with Maurice and Derek, two African-American men here, myself of mixed heritage and stuff like that. This is a dream, like to be able to, and heavy hitting, characters that have guided and informed us as sci-fi and comic artists for so long. So my gratitude today goes to both of you. Again, you really changed how I think, which I love when people do that. I love when my brain goes, and I love it when it spasms in a panel. So I got to thank you both. I know now I spend a lot of time pumping up your writings to my family members and stuff like that, making sure that we get these fresh new perspectives, not only in gaming, but throughout the literary community. So thank you to you and other writers like you, and young ones and new people trying to write more about it. They're very accessible. Maurice, type in his name, Maurice Broaddus, Derek Tyler Attico. You'll be able to find their websites, and they're very active in social media. They're around when I look for them. So thank you both for that. Let's go do the rounds with Maurice, Derek, and then Jim will finish for gratitude.
So for gratitude, I am always thankful to the Kepler Institute where I work, and especially the group of artists at Cafe Creative, because for me, I consider that applied Afrofuturism. It is we co-create the future we want to see, the future we want to create together, and we put it into action. Like once we cast that vision, it's like, hey, let's see what that looks like. Us starting to put that into place today. So I really appreciate the group of visionary neighbors that I work alongside.
I would say I would say I'm very appreciative to Titan Books and to George Sanderson, the managing editor, and for a particular reason though, because there are a lot of themes and ideas that I want to put in the autobiography, and they just let me fly, and I'm really appreciative of that because at no time did they were like, oh, this is too much, or that's, do this or that. It just let me fly and let me do what I wanted to do. And this is also my first novel. I've done a lot of short stories, but this is my first novel. And I think for them to put that trust in me for a first novel and just to be hands off is a big deal. So I'm very appreciative of that.
That's a way to come out of the gates ahead. That's awesome for your first novel, man. A dream. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, use it as a launching point for the next one. Very cool. Awesome. And my gratitude, I want to thank both of you for, being on the show, but especially as writers, thank you for your stories. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for bringing those your unique voices out into the open, into the public, and doing all that hard work. I know all writers do, but you're both clearly killing it and doing it day in and day out. So grateful to both of you for all the stories that you shared and all the stories to come. I can't wait to continue reading them. Also gratitude to all the writers who've come before and laid the foundation, laid the path, and showed us that, especially science fiction can be way more than just old white guys. Right. And there's just so much more diversity that's possible. And I'm just so grateful that I grew up working in a bookstore and I was exposed to everything. I had the opportunity to shelve and read everything available to me. And I wasn't, forced to look at a small selection of writing and authors. I got to read everything. And I'm super grateful for all the writers who've come before and the ones who are working at it now. And the new writers that we don't even know of yet who are being inspired by you. Writing their stuff, saying if Maurice and Derek can do this stuff, I can do it, and I can't wait to see what kind of new voices we have coming up in the future. And then I'm also grateful to all the fans. Star Trek Adventures fans are amazing, day in and day out. I see new fans coming into the game every day on all the different social media and all the different forums and stuff. You are supportive of each other to an extent that Modiphius can't keep up. Like I have, like myself and Nathan and a couple other people, like we're ready to answer questions about the game, but by the time a fan asks a question, other fans are jumping on it, answering it for them. And I think that just shows you that we have a healthy game, which I'm grateful for. But it's all about the fans. We wouldn't be doing this for going on 8 years now if we didn't have a great fan base, not just of Star Trek, but especially of the game itself. So thanks to all your fans. Keep it up. Love you all. Appreciate it. So Michael, let's wrap it up here. I think it's a great show. Thank you guys.
Oh, for sure. Next time we have these gentlemen on, I expect them both to be New York Times best-selling authors.
Don't put the pressure on them. They can't control that.
I have a feeling, though. I'm hinging my bets. Yeah. All right. Until next time, today was definitely an IDIC show.
Yeah. Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. We'll talk to you all again real soon.
Thank you.